The gunshot echoed through the canyon before Zara Zimmerman even realized she had pulled the trigger, and now 3 men lay dead behind her while she rode through the darkness with blood on her dress and terror in her heart. She had not meant to kill anyone. That was the truth she kept repeating to herself as her horse galloped through the New Mexico night in July of 1878, carrying her farther from everything she had ever known. The dress she wore, once white and pristine for her wedding day, was now stained with dirt and blood that was not her own. Her hands trembled on the reins as she urged her mare forward, knowing that by morning the whole territory would be hunting her. Zara was 22 years old, and she should have been married by now to Malcolm Crane, the wealthy rancher who had purchased her hand from her desperate father. She should have been lying in a marriage bed, belonging to a man she despised. Instead, she had fought back when Malcolm had tried to claim what he believed he had bought. She had grabbed his gun during the struggle. The first shot had been accidental. The second and third, when his brothers burst through the door, had been pure survival. Now she rode without direction, only knowing she needed distance and safety. The landscape stretched endlessly before her, dark mesas rising against a star-filled sky. Her horse was tiring, foam gathering at its mouth, and Zara knew they would both collapse soon if she did not find shelter. That was when she saw the faint glow of firelight in the distance. Every instinct told her to avoid other people, but exhaustion and fear overrode her caution. She directed her horse toward the light, praying it belonged to someone who would not immediately turn her over to whatever law was already forming a posse behind her. As she drew closer, she could make out the shape of a small ranch house with a barn nearby. Horses moved in a corral, and the scent of wood smoke drifted on the night air. She dismounted on shaking legs, nearly falling as her boots hit the ground. Her wedding dress caught on the saddle, tearing further, and she let out a small sob of frustration and terror. Before she could even approach the house, the door swung open. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway, and Zara froze, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and even from a distance she could see he held a rifle with practiced ease. "Who is out there?" His voice was deep, cautious but not hostile. Zara's mouth opened, but no words came. Her legs gave out, and she sank to her knees in the dirt, the adrenaline that had carried her this far finally abandoning her completely. She heard his footsteps approaching rapidly, and then he was kneeling beside her, the rifle set aside. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, taking in the sight of her blood-stained dress. "Are you hurt? Did someone hurt you?" She looked up into his face for the first time. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that caught the starlight. There was concern in those eyes, genuine worry, and something in Zara broke at the sight of human kindness after the horrors of the day. "I killed them," she whispered. "I killed 3 men, and now they will hang me." His expression did not change to horror or disgust as she expected. Instead, he studied her face carefully, then glanced at her torn and bloodied dress, and she saw understanding dawn in his features. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. She shook her head. Without hesitation, he scooped her up in his arms as though she weighed nothing. Zara wanted to protest, to tell him she could manage on her own, but her body had betrayed her completely. She let her head rest against his chest as he carried her toward the house. "My horse," she managed to say. "I will see to her once I get you inside," he promised. The interior of the house was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and basic furniture arranged practically. He set her down gently in a chair near the fire, then grabbed a blanket from a nearby trunk and wrapped it around her shoulders. "My name is Kane Daniels," he said, crouching before her so their eyes were level. This is my ranch, about 15 miles north of Fort Kearney. You are safe here for now. Do you understand? Zara nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. What is your name? He asked. Zara Zimmerman. Her voice came out scratchy and weak. Zara, he repeated, and the way he said it made her name sound like something precious. I am going to tend to your horse and make sure no one followed you here. Then I am going to make you something to eat and we are going to talk about what happened. Can you manage alone for a few minutes? Yes, she lied. He studied her face as though he could see through the falsehood, then nodded slowly. I will be quick. After he left, Zara let herself truly look around his home. It was Spartan, the dwelling of a man who lived alone and saw no need for decoration. But it was tidy and well-maintained, speaking to a person who took care of what was his. A gun rack held several rifles, and she could see rope and various tools hanging near the door. This was a working ranch, nothing fancy or pretentious like Malcolm Crane's ostentatious estate. Her mind shied away from thoughts of Malcolm, but she forced herself to remember. She needed to understand fully what she had done and what the consequences would be. She had met Malcolm only 3 times before her father announced the marriage. Her family had been struggling, their small farm barely producing enough to survive, and her father had accumulated gambling debts he could not pay. Malcolm had offered to clear those debts and provide for her parents in exchange for Zara's hand. Her mother had cried, but her father had insisted it was the only way. At 22, Zara was considered nearly too old for marriage anyway, and Malcolm was wealthy and established, even if he was 15 years her senior. The wedding ceremony had been small and rushed. Malcolm had seemed impatient to have it done, drinking heavily throughout the celebration. When he had taken her to his ranch house afterward, his true nature had revealed itself. He had not wanted a wife so much as property, something else he could own and control. When Zara had tried to ask for time, for gentleness, he had laughed and torn at her dress. She had fought him. She had never been a passive person, despite her father's attempts to make her docile and obedient. When Malcolm had struck her across the face, something had hardened in her heart. When he had grabbed for her again, she had seen his gun belt hanging on the bedpost. She had reached for it. The first shot had caught him in the chest. He had looked more surprised than pained, staring at her as though he could not believe she had dared. The second shot had come when his brothers, hearing the commotion, had burst through the door. She had not thought, only acted, firing twice more before running from the house to the stables and taking the first horse she could saddle. Now she was a murderer. The law would not care about her reasons, about Malcolm's violence or his brother's intentions. She was a woman who had killed 3 men on her wedding night. They would hang her, or worse, the door opened and Kane returned, brushing dust from his hands. Your horse is settled. She is a good mare, Arab mixed with something sturdy. She will recover well with rest. Zara nodded, unable to find words. Kane moved to the kitchen area and began pulling out supplies. She watched as he sliced bread, cheese, and cold meat, arranging them on a plate. He poured water from a pitcher into a cup and brought both to her. Eat, he said simply. You need strength. I am not hungry, she protested, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. A slight smile touched his lips, the first she had seen. Your body disagrees. Please eat. She took the plate with trembling hands and forced herself to take small bites. The food tasted like nothing, but she chewed and swallowed mechanically, knowing he was right about needing strength. Kane pulled a chair close and sat down, his elbows on his knees, watching her carefully. Tell me what happened, Zara. All of it. So she did. The words poured out of her between bites of bread and cheese, the whole sordid story from her father's debts to Malcolm's cruelty to the moment the gun had fired. She told him everything, including the fear that had chased her through the night and the certainty that she would hang for what she had done. When she finished, Kane was silent for a long moment. His jaw was tight, and she could see anger in his eyes, though she sensed it was not directed at her. "You did what you had to do," he said finally. "Any man who would force himself on a woman deserves what he gets, husband or not." "The law will not see it that way," Zara said bitterly. "No," Kane agreed. "The law rarely sees things the way it should. Then what am I to do?" The question came out as a desperate plea. "I cannot go back. I cannot turn myself in, but I cannot run forever either." Kane stood and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. She watched his profile, noting the strong line of his jaw and the way he held himself with quiet confidence. This was a man who had faced hardship and survived it, she realized. There was something weathered about him, a depth that came from experience. "You stay here," he said, turning back to face her. "With me." Zara blinked, certain she had misheard. "What?" "You stay here," he repeated, moving back toward her. "On my ranch. With me. You belong here now." "You do not understand what you are saying," Zara protested. "They will come looking for me. Malcolm Crane's family is powerful in this territory. They will send men, maybe even the law." "Let them come," Kane said with a calmness that was almost frightening. "You showed up here unannounced and afraid, and I am telling you that you belong here with me now. That is the end of it." "But why?" Zara stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. Why would you risk yourself for a stranger?" Kane looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. "Because the moment I saw you fall to your knees outside my home, something in me knew. I cannot explain it better than that. You belong here, Zara. I feel it in my bones." Tears spilled down her cheeks, surprising them both. "I cannot ask this of you. You are not asking. I am telling." He reached out and gently wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. "Tomorrow we will figure out the practical matters. Tonight you need to rest. You can take my bed. I will sleep out here by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Zara protested. "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "Come." He led her to a small bedroom off the main room. The bed was neatly made with simple quilts, and there was a washstand with a basin and pitcher of water. Kane lit an oil lamp on the bedside table, casting warm light across the space. "I will find you something clean to wear," he said, moving to a chest and pulling out one of his own shirts. "It will be too large, but better than sleeping in that dress." Zara took the shirt, feeling the soft fabric between her fingers. "Thank you, Kane, for everything." He nodded, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Get some rest, Zara. Tomorrow is going to be a new day." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Zara sank onto the edge of the bed. Her hands were still shaking as she unbuttoned the ruined wedding dress and let it fall to the floor. She poured water into the basin and scrubbed at the blood on her skin until it was gone, though she feared the stain on her soul would not wash away so easily. Kane's shirt hung nearly to her knees, and she rolled the sleeves up several times before they cleared her hands. It smelled like him, like leather and wood smoke and something indefinably masculine. Despite everything, she felt safe for the first time in months, maybe years. She climbed into his bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin, and stared at the ceiling. Her mind raced with everything that had happened, with Kane's inexplicable kindness and his declaration that she belonged here. It made no sense. They were strangers, yet something in her responded to his words, to the certainty in his voice when he had said them. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion won out. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was of Kane's eyes and the way he had looked at her as though she mattered, as though she was worth protecting. Zara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of movement in the other room. Sunlight streamed through the small window, telling her it was well past dawn. She sat up quickly, panic flooding through her as she remembered where she was and why. She found her way to the main room where Kane was working at the stove. He turned when he heard her, and his expression softened. "Good morning, I hope you slept well." "Better than I expected," she admitted. "What time is it?" "Nearly 8. I let you sleep, you needed it." He poured coffee into 2 cups and handed her one. "Sit, breakfast is almost ready." Zara took the cup gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. She watched as Kane cracked eggs into a pan and sliced more bread. He moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to caring for himself, and she found herself noticing details about him that she had missed in the darkness. His hands were strong and calloused from work. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar. When he concentrated, a small line appeared between his eyebrows. He served her eggs and bread, then sat across from her with his own plate. For a few minutes, they ate in companionable silence, and Zara marveled at how natural it felt to share breakfast with this man she had only met hours ago. "We need to talk about what happens next," Kane said finally, setting down his fork. "There are practicalities to consider." Zara nodded, her appetite disappearing. "I know." "First, we need to establish a story," Kane said. "As far as anyone knows, you are my wife. We married quietly some months ago, and you have been living here with me since then." "Your wife." Zara's voice came out higher than she intended. "It is the only way," Kane explained patiently. "A single woman living alone with a bachelor would cause talk, and talk leads to questions. But a married couple, that is normal, unremarkable. People will accept it without much scrutiny. But what about when someone recognizes me? What about when Malcolm's family comes looking? Fort Kearney is small, but we keep to ourselves mostly. I do not go into town often, and when I do, it is for supplies and nothing more. We can cut your hair, change your appearance somewhat. And as for Malcolm's family, they will be looking for a frightened girl running alone, not a married woman settled on a ranch." Zara considered this. It made a certain amount of sense, but the implications troubled her. "You are asking me to pretend to be your wife." "I am offering you protection and a new life," Kane corrected gently. "What you choose to call it is up to you." "But why?" The question burst from her again. "Why would you do this? You could be arrested for harboring me. You could lose everything." Kane stood and moved to the window, looking out at his land. "I have been alone for 3 years now," he said quietly. "My wife died giving birth to our son. He lived only 2 days after her. I buried them both on that hillside behind the house, and I thought I would never want anything again except to work this land until I died." Zara's throat tightened at the pain in his voice. "But then you showed up last night," Kane continued, turning to face her. "And something woke up in me that I thought was dead. I looked at you and I thought, this woman needs me. This woman is meant to be here. I cannot explain it better than that, Zara. I only know that I meant what I said. You belong here with me now." Tears stung her eyes again. "I am not your dead wife, Kane. I cannot replace what you lost." "I do not want you to replace her," he said firmly. "Emma was Emma and I loved her, but she is gone. You are here, alive and real, and you need safety. I can give you that. Maybe that is enough for now." Zara stood and moved closer to him, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She found none, only honest compassion and something else that made her pulse quicken. "What do you want from me in return?" "Help with the ranch," Kane said simply. "Company. Maybe someday, if you are willing, something more. But I will not force anything on you, Zara. You have my word on that." She believed him. Against all logic and reason, she believed this man she barely knew. "All right," she said softly. "I will stay. I will pretend to be your wife." and I will help you with the ranch." Relief washed over Kane's features, and he smiled. "Good. That is settled then. Now let us get you properly dressed. I am afraid my shirt, charming as it is on you, is not practical for work." They spent the morning going through Emma's old clothes, which Kane had kept in a trunk. Zara felt strange wearing a dead woman's dresses, but they fit reasonably well with some adjustments. Kane proved surprisingly handy with a needle, helping her take in the waist of a simple brown work dress. "Emma was taller than you," he explained as he worked, "and broader in the shoulders. She was built for ranch life." "Tell me about her," Zara said, wanting to understand this woman whose place she was taking. Kane's hands stilled for a moment, then continued their work. "She was the daughter of a neighboring rancher. We grew up together, knew each other our whole lives. Everyone always assumed we would marry, and eventually we did. She was strong and capable, never afraid of hard work. She could rope a calf as well as any man, and she made the best biscuits in 3 counties. You loved her very much," Zara said softly. "I did, but I also took her for granted, I think. We were so young when we married, barely 19. I thought we had forever." His voice grew rough. "When she died, I blamed myself. I should have taken her to a doctor when her time came. I should have done something more." Zara reached out and covered his hand with hers, stilling his stitching. "You cannot blame yourself for that. These things happen, Kane. It is a tragedy, but not your fault." His eyes met hers, dark with old pain. "My head knows that. My heart is slower to accept it." They finished the alterations in silence, and Zara changed into the work dress. It felt strange but also oddly right, as though she was putting on a new identity along with the new clothes. Over the following days, Zara began to learn the rhythms of life on Kane's ranch. He had 50 head of cattle, a dozen horses, chickens, and a milk cow. The work was endless but satisfying in a way she had never experienced. On her father's struggling farm, work had been desperate and joyless. Here, with Kane, it felt purposeful. He was an excellent teacher, patient and thorough. He showed her how to mend fences, how to check the cattle for illness, how to handle the horses. His hands would cover hers as he demonstrated techniques, and Zara found herself hyper-aware of his presence, of the warmth of his body when he stood close. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk. Kane told her about growing up in Texas, about coming to New Mexico territory with his parents as a boy, about building this ranch from nothing with Emma. Zara shared her own history more slowly. The pain of a childhood dominated by her father's disappointments and her mother's quiet desperation. "I was never what my father wanted," she admitted one night. "He wanted sons, workers who could help him turn the farm profitable. Instead, he got me, a daughter who asked too many questions and refused to be properly obedient." "I think you are exactly what you should be," Kane said, looking at her across the fire. The light played across his features, and Zara's breath caught at how handsome he was. "You barely know me," she protested, though her heart raced at his words. "I know enough," he replied. "I know you are brave enough to fight for your own life. I know you are smart enough to survive alone in the wilderness. I know you work hard and do not complain. That is more than enough." Zara looked away, unable to hold his intense gaze. "I am also a killer, Kane. Do not forget that." "You are a survivor," he corrected firmly. "There is a difference." A week passed, then 2. No riders came searching. No law appeared at the door. Zara began to relax slightly, though she remained vigilant. Kane took her into Fort Kearney for the first time on a sweltering August morning, and Zara's anxiety returned full force. "Remember," Kane said as they rode into town in his wagon, "you are my wife. We have been married since spring. You came from Santa Fe, where your family has a small restaurant. You are quiet by nature but friendly enough." Zara nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had cut her hair shorter at Kane's suggestion, and it now just brushed her shoulders instead of hanging to her waist. Combined with Emma's clothes and a bonnet that shaded her face, she hoped she looked different enough from the terrified bride who had fled Malcolm's ranch. Fort Kearney was smaller than Zara had expected, just a collection of buildings clustered around a main street. A general store, a saloon, a church, a smithy, and a few other establishments made up the whole of it. People moved about their business, and Zara fought the urge to stare at each face, wondering if they knew if they were looking for her. Kane helped her down from the wagon with gentle hands, and they entered the general store together. The proprietor, a balding man with spectacles, looked up with a smile. "Kane Daniels, good to see you. Been a few weeks since you came to town." "Been busy with the ranch, Mr. Patterson," Kane replied easily. "I would like to introduce you to my wife, Zara." Mr. Patterson's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Your wife? Well, I will be. I had no idea you had married, Kane. Congratulations to you both." "Thank you," Kane said. "We wanted to keep things quiet given Emma's passing. Did not feel right to make a big fuss." Understanding crossed the shopkeeper's face. Of course. Well, welcome to Fort Kearney, Mrs. Daniels. If you need anything at all, you just let me know." Zara forced a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson. That is very kind." They gathered supplies while the shopkeeper made friendly conversation, asking after the ranch and the weather and a dozen other harmless topics. Other customers came and went, and each time Zara tensed, but no one looked at her with recognition or suspicion. As they were loading the wagon, a woman approached. She was perhaps 40, with gray-streaked hair and a kind face. "Kane Daniels, is that you?" "Mrs. Henley, good morning," Kane said warmly. "I heard you had taken a wife," the woman said, looking at Zara with open curiosity. "I had to see for myself. After Emma, I worried you would spend the rest of your days alone out there." "Mrs. Henley, this is my wife, Zara," Kane said, putting an arm around Zara's waist in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. "Zara, Mrs. Henley runs the boarding house here in town. She was a good friend to Emma." "Pleased to meet you," Zara said softly. Mrs. Henley studied her with sharp but not unkind eyes. "You have a gentle way about you. I think you will be good for Kane. He needs someone to soften those rough edges." She smiled warmly. "You must come to church on Sunday. The whole community would love to welcome you properly." "We will try," Kane said diplomatically. "The ranch keeps us busy, but we will do our best." As they rode out of town, Zara let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. That was terrifying. "You did well," Kane assured her. "No one suspected anything. You are Mrs. Daniels now, as far as the world is concerned." Mrs. Daniels. The name settled over Zara like a cloak, both strange and oddly comforting. She glanced at Kane's profile as he drove the wagon, at the strong lines of his face and the capable hands holding the reins. He had given her safety and a new identity, asking nothing in return but help with the ranch and her company. But Zara was beginning to want to give him more. Over the past weeks, her gratitude had begun to transform into something deeper, something that made her pulse race when he smiled at her and her skin warm when he stood close. She found herself watching him when he worked, admiring the way his body moved, the competence in every gesture. At night, lying in his bed while he slept by the fire, she thought about what it would be like to invite him to share it. But she held back, uncertain. Kane had said that maybe someday there could be something more between them, but he had not pushed. She did not know if his restraint came from respect for her recent trauma or lack of interest. The uncertainty tormented her. One evening in late August, a storm rolled in from the west. Thunder rumbled across the plains, and lightning split the sky. The rain came down in sheets, pounding on the roof and turning the yard to mud. Zara and Kane worked together to secure the animals and make sure everything was battened down. They returned to the house soaked and breathless, and Kane built up the fire while Zara changed into dry clothes. When she emerged from the bedroom, he had stripped off his wet shirt and was toweling his hair dry. Zara stopped in the doorway, transfixed by the sight of his bare chest and shoulders, the play of muscle under tanned skin. Kane looked up and caught her staring. Something shifted in the air between them, a charge that had nothing to do with the lightning outside. "I should change," he said, his voice rough. "Wait," Zara said, the word escaping before she could stop it. Kane froze, the towel still in his hands. "Zara." She moved toward him, her heart pounding. "I need to know something, Kane. You said maybe someday there could be more between us. Did you mean that, or were you just being kind?" His eyes darkened, and he let the towel fall. "I meant it. I have wanted you since the first night, Zara. But I did not want to push, did not want you to feel obligated or afraid." "I am not afraid," Zara said, closing the distance between them. "Not of you, never of you." Kane reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "You are certain? I will not have you regretting this tomorrow." "I am certain," Zara breathed. "I want this. I want you." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the forced brutality Malcolm had attempted. Kane's lips were soft against hers, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Zara pressed closer, her hands coming up to rest on his bare chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her palms, as wild as her own. The kiss deepened, and Kane's arms came around her, pulling her flush against him. Zara felt heat pooling in her belly, desire chasing away the last shadows of fear. When Kane lifted her in his arms, she did not protest. When he carried her to the bedroom, she welcomed it. And when they came together in the firelight, with the storm raging outside, it was everything that her wedding night should have been and was not. Tender, passionate, mutual. Right. Afterward they lay tangled together in the quilts, Kane's fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I love you, Zara," he said quietly. "I know it is fast, I know it seems impossible, but I do. I love you." Tears sprang to Zara's eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. "I love you too, Kane. I think I started falling for you the moment you told me I belonged here." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You do belong here, with me. Always." "Always," Zara agreed and sealed the promise with another kiss. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Zara's life. She and Kane were inseparable, working together during the day and falling into each other's arms each night. The pretense of their marriage became reality in every way that mattered, though they both knew that legally they were not bound. "We should make it official," Kane said one morning in September as they worked together to repair a section of fence. "A real marriage, I mean." Zara looked up from the post she was holding steady. "How? We cannot exactly go to a church and have a ceremony. Someone might ask questions about a previous marriage being dissolved." Kane hammered another nail, considering. "There are men who travel through, ministers who will perform ceremonies with few questions asked. We could watch for one, have a private ceremony here on the ranch. Just the two of us and God." The idea appealed to Zara more than she wanted to admit. Despite everything, some part of her wanted that legitimacy, that public declaration of their commitment. "I would like that," she said softly. "Then we will make it happen," Kane promised. Their opportunity came sooner than expected. The following week, Kane returned from a trip to town with news of a traveling preacher who was making his way through the territory. "He will be in Fort Kearney for 3 days, Kane explained. "I spoke with him briefly. He seems like a decent man, and he said he would be happy to perform a marriage ceremony. I told him we wanted something private, just the two of us, and he did not ask questions. Zara felt a flutter of nerves and excitement. When? Tomorrow afternoon, if you are willing. He will ride out here so we do not have to worry about curious townspeople. Tomorrow. Zara nodded slowly, then smiled. Yes, tomorrow is perfect. They spent the evening preparing. Zara washed and pressed Emma's nicest dress, a deep blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. Kane cleaned up the house, picking wildflowers from the meadow near the creek and arranging them in jars. Watching him fuss over these details, Zara fell in love with him all over again. The next day dawned clear and beautiful. Zara dressed carefully, her hands trembling slightly as she buttoned the blue dress. Kane wore his best clothes, a white shirt and dark trousers, his hair neatly combed. When they looked at each other, both ready, Zara saw such love in his eyes that her breath caught. The preacher arrived in the early afternoon, a thin man with silver hair and kind eyes. He asked for their names and ages, making notes in a worn Bible, but requested no documentation or proof of previous marital status. They stood together in front of the fireplace, the preacher reading from his Bible in a sonorous voice. Zara listened to the familiar words, but her attention was focused on Kane, on the way he held her hands as though they were precious, on the way he looked at her as though she was his entire world. "Do you, Kane Daniels, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the preacher asked. "I do," Kane said firmly, his eyes never leaving Zara's face. "And do you, Zara Zimmerman, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Zara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Kane pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Zara tasted salt from her own tears and felt his arms strong and sure around her. This was right. This was real. This was everything she had never dared hope for. The preacher stayed for a simple meal, sharing news from other parts of the territory, and then departed with their thanks and payment for his services. As his wagon disappeared down the road, Kane turned to Zara and swept her up in his arms. "Alone at last, Mrs. Daniels," he said with a grin. Zara laughed, her heart full to bursting. "What will you do with me now, Mr. Daniels?" "Everything," he promised, and carried her to their bedroom. Autumn arrived, painting the landscape in golds and reds. Zara had been at the ranch for 3 months now, and the terror of those first nights felt like something from another lifetime. She and Kane worked the ranch together, their partnership seamless and natural. The cattle were healthy, the horses well-trained, and their small vegetable garden produced more than they needed for themselves. In town, the community had accepted them completely. No whispers followed Zara when she made her infrequent trips to the general store. No suspicious glances were directed their way. She was simply Mrs. Daniels, the quiet wife of Kane Daniels, and her previous life as Zara Zimmerman, desperate daughter and reluctant bride, seemed to belong to someone else entirely. But complacency was dangerous, and Zara was reminded of that one October afternoon when Kane returned from town with a grim expression. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately, reading the tension in his shoulders. Kane waited until they were inside with the door closed before speaking. There were men in town asking questions, not law but hired guns by the look of them. They were asking about a young woman who disappeared after killing 3 men, showing a photograph. Zara's blood ran cold. Malcolm's family, most likely. Kane took her hands in his. "Do not panic." No one gave them any information because no one had any to give. "You look different now, with your shorter hair and different clothes. And the photograph they were showing was old, maybe taken a year ago. You do not look much like it anymore." "But they are still looking," Zara said, fear creeping back into her voice. After all this time, they are still looking. Men with money and pride do not give up easily, Kane said grimly. But Zara, listen to me. You are my wife now, legally and truly. Even if someone did recognize you, they would have to go through me to get to you, and I will not let that happen. I do not want you hurt because of me, Zara said desperately. Kane pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Too bad. You are mine now, and I protect what is mine. We are in this together, do you understand? Zara nodded against his chest, drawing strength from his certainty. What do? We stay alert. We do not go to town unless necessary, and we prepare for the possibility that someone might come here. Kane pulled back to look into her eyes. Can you shoot? Not well, Zara admitted. My father never wanted me handling guns. Then I will teach you, Kane said. Tomorrow we start practicing. I want you able to defend yourself if needed. Over the following weeks, Kane trained Zara with pistol and rifle both. She proved a quick study, her natural stubbornness translating into determination to master the skills. They practiced in the meadow behind the house, and slowly Zara's aim improved from abysmal to adequate to actually good. You have a steady hand, Kane observed one afternoon, watching her hit the target 3 times in a row. Better than most men I have known. I am motivated, Zara said dryly. No more strangers came through town asking questions, and as winter approached, Zara began to hope that perhaps Malcolm's family had finally given up the search. The incident receded in her mind, becoming just another thing to be cautious about rather than an immediate threat. December brought snow, transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland. Zara and Kane spent long evenings by the fire, wrapped in blankets and each other's arms. They talked about the future, about expanding the ranch, about the life they were building together. I want children, Kane said one night, his hand resting on Zara's stomach. If you do, I know that after what you went through, you might not want to risk it, but I want you to know that I would love to have a family with you. Zara covered his hand with her own. I want children too. I want to fill this house with noise and laughter. I want to give you the family you lost. Kane kissed her deeply. Then we will have that, all of it. Spring came, and with it a sense of renewal. Zara had been at the ranch for 9 months now, and the woman she had become bore little resemblance to the terrified girl who had arrived. She was stronger, both physically and emotionally. Her hands bore calluses from ranch work. Her skin had bronzed from hours in the sun. She could rope a calf, mend a fence, and handle a rifle with confidence. She was happy one morning in April. Zara woke feeling strange. Her stomach was unsettled and certain smells made her feel queasy. When it persisted for several days, she began to suspect the truth. Kane, she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, I think I might be pregnant. He went very still beside her. Are you certain? Not completely, but all the signs are there. She looked at him nervously. Are you pleased? In answer, Kane let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. Pleased? Zara, I am more than pleased. I am overjoyed. We are going to have a baby. His happiness was infectious, and Zara found herself laughing and crying at the same time. We are going to have a baby, she repeated, wonder in her voice. As the weeks passed, Zara's pregnancy became undeniable. Her stomach began to swell, and she felt the first flutters of movement. Kane was attentive to the point of being overprotective, insisting she rest more and work less. Zara tolerated his fussing with good humor, understanding that it came from a place of love and old grief. They were preparing the spare room as a nursery when riders appeared on the horizon. Zara spotted them first from the kitchen window. 3 men on horseback moving purposefully toward the house. Her heart began to race. Kane, she called, trying to keep her voice calm, He came immediately, saw what she was looking at, and his expression hardened. "Get the rifle. Go to the bedroom and stay there unless I call for you." "Kane, I am not leaving you alone to face them," Zara protested. "Please," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "For me, for our baby, I need to know you are safe. Please, Zara." She nodded reluctantly and retrieved the rifle, positioning herself in the bedroom where she could see through a crack in the door but remain hidden. Kane stepped out onto the porch as the three riders approached. Zara recognized the body language of dangerous men, the way they sat their horses with arrogant confidence. Her hands tightened on the rifle. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Kane called out, his tone pleasant but his stance ready. The lead rider, a man with dark hair and cold eyes, smiled without warmth. "We are looking for a woman, Zara Zimmerman. We have reason to believe she might be in this area." "Do not know anyone by that name," Kane said easily. "Just me and my wife out here." "Your wife?" The man's eyes narrowed. "We heard you had married recently. Rather sudden, was it not?" "After your first wife died, a man gets lonely," Kane said with a shrug. "I do not see how my personal life is any business of yours." "It becomes our business when your new wife might be a murderer," the man said coldly. "I represent the Crane family. Zara Zimmerman killed Malcolm Crane and his two brothers. There is a substantial reward for information leading to her capture." "Sorry, I cannot help you," Kane said, his voice hardening. "Now I will ask you to leave my property." The man studied Kane for a long moment, then looked past him toward the house. "We would like to speak to your wife, just to verify she is not the woman we are looking for." "No," Kane said flatly. "My wife is pregnant and not feeling well. I will not have her disturbed by strangers making wild accusations." "Pregnant?" The man's smile turned knowing. "That is convenient. Hard to tell who a woman really is when her body is changing, is it not?" Zara's stomach churned with fear and anger. She wanted to step out to confront these men, but Kane's desperate plea to stay hidden held her in place. "I am going to say this one more time," Kane said, his hand moving to rest on his gun. "Get off my property." The tension ratcheted up instantly. The three men tensed in their saddles, and Zara saw their hands move toward their weapons. Time seemed to slow as she watched through the crack in the door. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," the lead man said. "But one way or another, we are going to see the woman in that house." "Over my dead body," Kane said quietly. Zara made her decision. She stepped out of the bedroom, rifle in hand, and moved to stand in the doorway behind Kane. "Then you will have to shoot us both," she said clearly. Kane's shoulders stiffened, but he did not order her back inside. Instead, he shifted slightly, positioning himself to shield her body with his own. The lead man's eyes widened slightly as he took in Zara's appearance. She saw him comparing her to whatever image he carried, saw the uncertainty cross his features. Her shorter hair, her sun-darkened skin, her changed body, all of it made her look different from the pale farm girl in the old photograph. "Zara Zimmerman?" he asked, but his voice held doubt. "My name is Zara Daniels," she said firmly. "I have been married to Kane since spring. I do not know who this Zimmerman woman is, but she is not me." "You look somewhat similar to her," the man persisted. "I imagine many women in this territory do," Zara said. "We are not exactly rare, despite what men seem to think." One of the other riders leaned over and said something quietly to the leader. The man frowned, studying them both, then finally nodded. "All right, perhaps we were mistaken, but if you do see or hear anything about this woman, there is a reward, $500. "We will keep that in mind," Kane said coldly. "Now get out." The three men turned their horses and rode away, but not before the leader looked back one more time, suspicion still clear in his eyes. Zara's legs gave out the moment they were out of sight, and Kane caught her before she fell. "I have got you," he murmured, holding her tight. "I have got you." "They will be back," Zara said, her voice shaking. "He did not believe us." "Maybe," Kane agreed, "but they have no proof, and they cannot search every ranch in the territory. We will be more careful, stay closer to home." "What if they tell the law their suspicions?" Zara asked. "Then the law will investigate and they will find a legally married couple living quietly on their ranch," Kane said. "Zara, we have done everything right. We have established your identity as my wife. We have become part of the community. Unless they can prove otherwise, there is nothing they can do." Zara wanted to believe him, but fear had taken root in her heart again. That night, she lay awake listening to every sound, jumping at shadows. Kane held her close, his presence comforting but not enough to banish her anxiety completely. The next few weeks were tense. Zara insisted on increasing their weapons practice, and Kane taught her how to watch for signs of riders approaching from any direction. They were ready as they could be, but no more riders came. No law appeared. Life continued. Summer arrived with blazing heat, and Zara's pregnancy advanced. She was nearing her 8th month now, her belly swollen and heavy. Kane had become impossible about her resting, barely letting her lift a finger. Zara bore it with patience, understanding that his fear of losing another wife and child drove his overprotectiveness. "I am strong," she reminded him one evening as he fussed over whether she was sitting comfortably enough. "Women have babies every day. I will be fine." "I know," he said, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "I just cannot lose you, Zara. You and this baby are my whole world now." She pulled him down beside her and took his hand, placing it on her belly where their child was moving. "Feel that. That is our baby, strong and healthy. Everything is going to be all right." When her labor began in late August, Kane nearly panicked. Zara had to talk him through his own fear even as contractions racked her body. They had discussed bringing in a midwife from town, but the risk of questions and scrutiny had seemed too great. Instead, Kane had read every book on childbirth he could find, and Zara trusted him to help her through this. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Zara had never experienced such pain, and there were moments when she understood how Emma could have died from this. But she was determined to survive, determined to hold her child and continue the life she had built with Kane. Finally, as the sun was rising, she pushed one last time and heard the sharp cry of a newborn. Kane's hands were shaking as he lifted their son, tears streaming down his face as he wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed him in Zara's arms. "A boy," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We have a son." Zara looked down at the tiny face, at the dark hair and scrunched features, and felt her heart expand beyond what she thought possible. "He is perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect," Kane corrected, kissing her forehead. "You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known." They named him James, after Kane's father. Little James was healthy and loud, announcing his displeasure with hunger or a wet diaper at impressive volume. Zara spent her days feeding and rocking him, marveling at this new life they had created. Kane was a devoted father, taking James for walks around the property and talking to him constantly, despite his inability to understand a word. "He needs to know the sound of his father's voice," Kane explained when Zara teased him about his constant narration. "And I am teaching him about the ranch. Never too early to start." Watching Kane with their son, Zara felt a peace settle over her that she had not known was possible. This was her family. This was her home. The terror and violence of her wedding night to Malcolm seemed impossibly distant, something that had happened to a different person in a different life. 2 years passed. James grew from a baby into a toddler, curious and energetic, following Kane around the ranch like a small shadow. The threat from Malcolm's family had faded into nothing more than a bad memory. No one had come looking for Zara in all that time. It seemed she had truly become someone new. In those 2 years, the ranch had prospered. With Zara's help, Kane had increased their herd and improved their land. They had built a small extension onto the house, adding more rooms for their growing family. Because Zara was pregnant again, this time with a daughter if the midwife's predictions were correct. Yes, Zara had finally agreed to bring in Mrs. Henley, who served as midwife for the community when her time came. With James to care for, it seemed more practical, and enough time had passed that Zara felt reasonably safe from discovery. "How are you feeling?" Kane asked one evening as they sat on the porch, James playing at their feet and Zara's belly round with their second child. "Tired," Zara admitted, "but happy. So happy, Kane. Sometimes I wake up and I cannot believe this is my life." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Do you ever regret it? Staying here with me instead of trying to clear your name to get justice for what happened?" Zara considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "What happened that night was terrible, but it led me here, to you, to this family, to this life. I would not change that, even if I could." "I love you," Kane said simply, "more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," Zara replied. "You saved me, Kane, in every way a person can be saved." Their daughter was born in October of 1881, 3 years after Zara had first arrived at the ranch. The labor was easier this time, and Mrs. Henley proved her worth, helping Zara through it with experienced hands and gentle encouragement. "You have a daughter," the midwife announced, placing the tiny girl in Zara's arms. "Perfect and healthy." Kane looked at his daughter with undisguised adoration. "She is beautiful, just like her mother." They named her Emma Grace, honoring Kane's first wife and the mercy that had brought them together. Little Emma had Kane's dark hair and Zara's light eyes, and her brother James immediately appointed himself her protector. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The days were busy and exhausting and wonderful. Kane and Zara worked the ranch together while managing the chaos of toddler James and baby Emma. They hired a young hand to help with the heavier work, a quiet boy named Daniel who asked no questions and worked hard. On Sundays, they would sometimes go into Fort Kearney for church, where they had become respected members of the community. People spoke to them with warmth and friendship, and no one ever questioned Zara's history or origins. She was simply Mrs. Daniels, the hard-working wife of Kane Daniels, mother to 2 beautiful children. One Sunday afternoon, as they were leaving the church, an older woman Zara did not recognize approached them. She had elegant bearing and expensive clothes, clearly someone passing through rather than a local resident. "Excuse me," the woman said, her eyes fixed on Zara. "Have we met before? You look so familiar to me." Zara's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression pleasant. "I do not believe so, madam. I am not from this area originally." "Where are you from?" the woman pressed. Kane stepped forward slightly, his hand on the small of Zara's back in a supportive gesture. "My wife is from Santa Fe. Her family owned a small business there." The woman frowned, still studying Zara's face. "No, that is not it. I am certain I have seen you before." Then her expression cleared. "You know who you remind me of? There was a girl years ago who was accused of murder down near Albuquerque. Terrible scandal. She disappeared completely after her wedding night. You look quite a bit like the photographs that circulated at the time." Zara felt the blood drain from her face, but Kane's hand pressed more firmly against her back, steadying her. "I am afraid my wife gets that quite often," he said smoothly. "Something about her features, I suppose, but I assure you she has been here with me for several years now. We married in the spring of 78. 78. The woman's eyebrows rose. But I thought the incident with that girl was in 78 as well. A coincidence, Kane said firmly. Now, if you will excuse us, our children are getting tired and we have a long ride home. They moved away before the woman could ask more questions, and Zara felt herself trembling as they loaded James and Emma into the wagon. Kane drove them out of town at a normal pace, not wanting to appear rushed or guilty, but once they were clear of Fort Kearney, he pushed the horses faster. That was close, Zara said quietly, her hands clutched tight in her lap. Too close, Kane agreed grimly. That woman clearly had some knowledge of what happened. If she decides to pursue her suspicions, we could have problems. Maybe we should leave, Zara said desperately. Go somewhere else, start over again. And go where? Kane asked. We have built a life here, Zara. We have a ranch, friends, a place in this community. Starting over would be just as risky, and we would lose everything we have worked for. I will not have you and the children pay for what I did, Zara said fiercely. Kane pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. What you did was survive. What you did was defend yourself from a man who would have raped and brutalized you. I will not let you feel guilty for that, Zara. Not now, not ever. Tears streamed down her face. But that woman recognized me, or thought she did. What if she tells someone? What if the law comes? Then we face it together, Kane said firmly. We have a legal marriage, we have children, we have roots in this community. Any accusations against you are just that, accusations. There is no proof you are this Zara Zimmerman they were looking for all those years ago. My name is Zara, she pointed out miserably. A common enough name, Kane countered. And your married name is Daniels. You are not the same person anymore, Zara. You are my wife, the mother of my children, a respected member of this community. That carries weight. Zara wanted to believe him, but the encounter had shaken her badly. Over the following days, she found herself watching the road constantly, expecting riders or the law to appear at any moment. But days turned into weeks and nothing happened. No one came. Life continued as normal. Whatever that woman had suspected, she had apparently not pursued it. Slowly, Zara began to relax again. One evening in December, as they sat by the fire with the children asleep, Kane suddenly said, I have been thinking about what happened with that woman at the church. Zara looked up from the mending in her lap, anxiety flickering. What about it? I think it is time we stopped running from your past, Kane said carefully. I think we should confront it head on. What do you mean? Zara asked, confused and worried. Kane set aside the rope he had been working on and moved to sit beside her. I mean we go to the law ourselves. We tell them your story, the truth of what happened that night. We make it clear that you were defending yourself from an assault. We get ahead of any accusations. They will arrest me, Zara said immediately. They will take me away from you and the children. Maybe, Kane admitted, but maybe not. Times are changing, Zara. People are starting to understand that women have rights, that they should not have to submit to violence just because a man claims ownership of them. And we have standing now, respectability. That counts for something. It is too risky, Zara protested. What if they hang me? What happens to James and Emma then? What happens if someone else recognizes you and reports you? Kane countered. We would be caught by surprise, unable to control the narrative. But if we go to them first, if we tell the story our way, we have a chance to make them understand. Zara stood and moved to the window, looking out at the dark landscape. I am so afraid, Kane. I finally have everything I ever wanted. I do not want to lose it. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. You will not lose it. I promise you that. I will fight for you with everything I have. But we cannot keep living under this shadow, Zara. It is not fair to you or to our children. They deserve to grow up without the fear that their mother might suddenly be taken from them." Zara turned in his arms, searching his face. "You truly believe this is the right choice?" "I do," Kane said firmly. "And I will be with you every step of the way. Whatever happens, we face it together." After much discussion and sleepless nights, they decided to act. Kane arranged for Mrs. Henley to watch the children, telling her they needed to make a trip to the territorial capital on business. The older woman agreed readily, having grown fond of James and Emma. They rode to Santa Fe in January of 1882, both nervous but determined. Kane had drafted a written statement detailing everything that had happened the night Malcolm Crane died, and Zara had read it over so many times she had it memorized. The territorial courthouse was an imposing building, and Zara felt her courage faltering as they climbed the steps. But Kane's hand was firm in hers, and she drew strength from his presence. They were directed to the office of a judge named Carver, an older man with a stern face and sharp eyes. He listened without interruption as Kane presented their case, reading from the statement he had prepared. "So you are claiming self-defense," Judge Carver said when Kane had finished, "against your husband on your wedding night?" "Yes, Your Honor," Zara said, speaking for the first time. "He tried to force himself on me. When I resisted, he became violent. I grabbed his gun only to protect myself." "And his brothers? They burst in during the struggle. I was terrified. I thought they would kill me. I fired without thinking." Zara's voice shook with the memory. Judge Carver was silent for a long moment, studying them both. Finally, he said, "This is a very serious matter. 3 men are dead. The Crane family has significant influence in this territory. They have been demanding justice. Justice would be recognizing that my wife had every right to defend herself," Kane said firmly. "She was being attacked. Any man in her position would have done the same, and no one would question it." "But she is not a man," the judge pointed out. "No," Kane agreed. "She is a woman who was sold like cattle to a man who viewed her as property. She is a woman who fought back when that man tried to rape her. And she is a woman who has spent the last 3.5 years building a good life, being a devoted wife and mother, contributing to her community. Does none of that matter?" The judge leaned back in his chair. "I will need to investigate this claim. I will need to speak to witnesses, to the Crane family, to verify the facts as you have presented them." "We understand," Kane said. "We are prepared to cooperate fully." "Mrs. Daniels, I am not going to arrest you at this time," the judge said, his eyes on Zara. "But you are not to leave the territory. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Zara said, relief flooding through her. They rode back to Fort Kearny in a state of exhausted hope. The first step had been taken. Now they could only wait and pray that justice would prevail. The investigation took months. Representatives from the court traveled to the Crane Ranch, interviewed people who had known Malcolm, spoke to the doctor who had examined the bodies. Kane and Zara gave their statements multiple times, answering the same questions over and over. It was exhausting and nerve-wracking, but Zara felt a strange sense of relief at having the truth finally in the open. She no longer had to hide or live in fear of discovery. Whatever happened now, at least she would face it honestly. In May of 1882, they received word that Judge Carver had reached a decision and requested their presence in Santa Fe. Once again, they left the children with Mrs. Henley and made the journey to the capital, both terrified of what they would hear. The courtroom was fuller than Zara expected, with journalists and curious onlookers filling the benches. The Crane family was represented by several well-dressed men who glared at Zara with undisguised hostility. Judge Carver entered and called the room to order. He held a sheaf of papers, the results of his investigation, and Zara felt her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. After careful consideration of all the evidence, the judge began, I have reached a conclusion in the matter of Zara Daniels, formerly Zara Zimmerman, regarding the deaths of Malcolm Crane and his brothers on the night of July 15, 1878. The room was utterly silent. The evidence supports Mrs. Daniels's claim that Malcolm Crane attempted to assault her on their wedding night. Multiple witnesses have testified to his violent temper and inappropriate behavior toward women. The physical evidence, including bruising documented on Mrs. Daniels's body when she fled and the condition of the room where the incident occurred, supports a violent struggle. Judge Carver looked directly at Zara. While the deaths of 3 men is a tragedy, I find that Mrs. Daniels acted in self-defense, first against an assault by her husband, and then against what she reasonably perceived as a threat to her life from his brothers. Therefore, I am dismissing all charges against her. She is free to go. Zara's knees buckled and Kane caught her, holding her upright as tears streamed down her face. Around them, the courtroom erupted in noise, some people applauding, others shouting objections. The Crane family representatives were on their feet, protesting loudly, but Judge Carver banged his gavel. My decision is final, he said firmly. This case is closed. Outside the courthouse, Zara gulped in fresh air, hardly able to believe what had just happened. It is over, she whispered. It is really over. It is over, Kane confirmed, his arms tight around her. You are free, Zara. Truly free. They rode home with lighter hearts than they had carried in years. When they arrived at the ranch and swept James and Emma into their arms, Zara felt complete in a way she never had before. She was no longer running, no longer hiding. She was simply herself, with her family, in the home they had built together. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm after that. The community, which had already accepted them, rallied around them after news of the judge's decision spread. People expressed sympathy for what Zara had endured and admiration for her courage in facing the law honestly. The ranch continued to prosper. Over the following years, Kane and Zara expanded their holdings, buying adjacent land and increasing their herds. They became one of the more successful ranching families in the region, known for their quality livestock and fair dealings. James grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Emma was bright and curious, always asking questions and getting into mischief. They added 2 more children to their family, a son they named Matthew in 1884 and another daughter, Sarah, in 1886. The house rang with the sound of children's laughter, and Zara marveled daily at the fullness of her life. She would sometimes stand on the porch in the evenings, watching Kane work with the horses or play with the children, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her to his door that terrible night so long ago. One evening in 1890, 12 years after Zara had first arrived at the ranch, she and Kane sat on their porch watching the sunset. The children were inside doing their evening chores, their voices drifting out through the open windows. At 40 and 34 respectively, they had both aged, though Kane insisted Zara was more beautiful than ever. You ever think about that night? Kane asked suddenly. When you first showed up here, sometimes, Zara admitted. I think about how terrified I was. How certain I was that my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning, Kane said, taking her hand. Yes, Zara smiled at him, this man who had given her everything. You told me I belonged here with you. Do you remember? Of course I remember. It was the truest thing I have ever said. Why did you say it? Zara asked, curious even after all these years. Why were you so certain when we were complete strangers? Kane was quiet for a moment, considering. "I saw something in you that night," he said finally. "A strength, a determination to survive. And I felt something shift in me, like a piece that had been missing suddenly clicking into place. I cannot explain it better than that. I just knew you were meant to be here." "Fate," Zara said softly. "Fate," Kane agreed. "Or luck, or the grace of God. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Inside, James was helping Matthew with his reading while Emma and Sarah set the table for supper. It was an ordinary evening, unremarkable in every way except for the deep contentment that suffused it. Zara thought about the girl she had been, desperate and afraid, riding through the darkness with blood on her hands. That girl had been broken, shattered by violence and betrayal. But she had also been strong enough to survive, brave enough to fight for her own life, determined enough to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. That girl had found her way to Kane Daniels's door, and he had given her the greatest gift possible, the chance to become someone new. Not by running from her past, but by facing it honestly and building something better on the other side. "I love you," she said, squeezing Kane's hand. "I love this life we have built together. I love our children and our home and everything we have created here." "I love you too," Kane replied, his voice rich with emotion. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara Daniels, then and now and always." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they sat together on their porch, two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built a life filled with light. Behind them, their children laughed and talked, secure in the love and stability their parents provided. Ahead of them lay years more of seasons turning, of children growing, of the ranch thriving under their joint stewardship. The Wild West was changing around them, slowly becoming more civilized, more settled. But here on their ranch, with their family gathered close, Kane and Zara had created something timeless. A love born from compassion and courage, nurtured through challenge and hardship, and flourishing into something beautiful and lasting. Zara had shown up unannounced and afraid, a desperate woman with nowhere else to turn. Kane had looked at her and simply known, "You belong here with me now." And from that moment, everything had changed. Two broken people had found each other and discovered they could be whole. A woman running from her past, and a man grieving his losses had together built a future neither could have imagined. And as they sat together watching the night settle over their land, their hands clasped tight and their hearts full, they knew without question that they had found exactly where they were meant to be. Together, home, free,